Okay, we are live. Welcome to our special holiday edition of our weekly basic income discussion and debate group. This week we're talking about basic income versus the idea of a jobs guarantee. So basic income is the idea that you give everyone the same amount of money, and a job guarantee is that you promise that everyone who wants a job can have one. So obviously a similar effect of the two is that if everyone has a job and they all have an income, then they all get an income. So kind of in that way, a job guarantee and a basic income are similar in that respect. So the question is, which one is better and why? I think there are people in this room who have some opinions one way or the other. And, you know, we've read an article by Annie Lowrey in The Atlantic, or some of us have read it, and we'll be discussing quotes from the article. And she's, poking at it a little bit. If you're not familiar with Annie Lowrey, she's a journalist, and she wrote a book about basic income called Give People Money. But she's also very flexible in exploring different alternatives. So we're going to discuss quotes from that. And then there was also a debate that took place last week at the New School, not at the New School, at NYU in New York City. And that was a debate between a job guarantee proponent, economist Darrick Hamilton from the New School, and a basic income proponent. They're both economists. So Ioana Marinescu is an economist from University of Pennsylvania. So they had this debate, and we'll watch some clips from the debate as well and discuss those. I don't think anyone has to worry about running out of things to say because we have plenty of kind of just material that we can. Yeah. So a question we might have in the back of our heads as we do this discussion is what are the problems that we're trying to solve with these two different policies? Because I think the problems that that basic income is trying to solve are maybe slightly different than the problems that the job guarantee is trying to solve. And in the debate, the way it's framed is which one is a better tool for addressing inequality. And if you guys have been following my blog, I wrote a blog post a couple of days ago, and the title was Inequality is Not the Problem. So I have some opinions on that. So even whether we should even it's the right question to be asking, which one's better at solving inequality. I'm not sure that is. But I want to start by getting everyone's thoughts on what problems they think basic income and a jobs guarantee should be solving or would be solving, and how you kind of compare those things, just to kind of get us started. Bethany, do you want to start?
Yeah. So I think basic income is trying to solve the problem of getting money to people to increase their well-being, and it's also trying to solve the problem of people using their time in ways that are personally meaningful and possibly socially productive, because they potentially have more time to use with freedom if they have a basic income, or somebody's going to have to pay them enough to entice them away from not using their time in some other way. So presumably that's somebody who has some incentive because they have something productive for that person to do. It would be the ideal way to think about it. I think a jobs guarantee is also trying to solve the problem of how to get money to people to increase their well-being. I think it's also trying to solve the problem of how to do that in a way that matches people's political intuitions about somebody needing to deserve to get the money that they have. And I think it's also sometimes trying to solve the problem of people having some sense of purpose or having some sense of socialization, which they talk a little bit about in the article, kind of just being in line with the norms of society and being kind of feeling like a part of society, not feeling ostracized, that kind of thing. So a job can be like a point of socialization contact for people. So I think those are the things. Did you want us to address our personal opinion or just what you think both are trying to do?
You can, definitely your opinion is.
I am pretty strongly against a jobs guarantee because of what I perceive to be the reduction in people's freedom to use their time in the ways that they want and to use their time productively, because you're essentially saying that whether or not work is really needed, that whether or not this person's time is really being used productively, they have to use it in some way. You're telling them they have to use it in order to get their money. which to me seems like an unnecessary infringement on people's freedom, and also kind of counterproductive or wasteful of the valuable resource of human potential and of maybe other natural resources too. So that's why I'm against it. But yeah.
Yep.
Interesting. Well, I haven't read the article, but I'll opine anyway. It seems too that these two streams of thought have ideology underlying them. I mean, the jobs guarantee is more in line with belief in capitalistic thinking. I mean, it's less of a kind of intrusion into what people think of as real capitalism, whereas a basic income can be read as more socialist in that way, in that we're giving people money for nothing. And it's kind of like what you were saying, that the jobs thing is more of a traditional way of approaching the same problem. So you're not really also giving them the freedom to design another kind of life. You're not putting that on them to design another kind of life for themselves. You're just saying, okay, well, here's another job. Here's a job. And you understand what a job is because you've had jobs, and society appreciates you having a job, so here's a job. And that's a way to get money. And that seems like a very, that's a less radical approach, from my opinion, than a basic income. The other thought I had about this was the control of how much money people get. I mean, if it's basic income related, then you can decide on an amount and that everybody gets. And there's less fluctuation, it would seem. I don't know about the economics behind both of these, but there's much more irregularity in a jobs guarantee. What kind of job will it be? How much money will it pay? Is it, as Bethany was saying, even upholding, is it worth having? Or is it just a job that's been created to have a job? So it seems like there's more chance for variation and problems with the jobs guarantee. So those are my thoughts.
Yeah, I'm also against the jobs guarantee. I can say lots of reasons. Generally, governments, they tend to waste resources by giving this kind of free things. I mean, jobs, they won't be free, but when they hire lots of people, they government cannot manage it productively, efficiently. It's a long topic for me, but and for jobs guarantee, for example, mothers and housewives, they could still can't get a job.
Yeah.
I mean, they still have to take care of their children. They cannot get an income. It's not fair for them. That's it for now.
Okay, Bethany and other people said a lot of the things that I would have said. So we're like, do I have anything to add? But I think sort of similar to what other people have said, the idea of a jobs guarantee feels problematic in the sort of the fragility of it, of like, okay, we've guaranteed you a job, but like, is it actually addressing what we're, like a jobs guarantee tries to get at like purpose and meaning and dignity, but it's not clear that you can like design jobs for masses of people that would accomplish that. And there's a question of like, well, okay, how much does that pay? Do you get healthcare? Like, is it actually addressing all of the other like well-being? And it feels sort of simpler to be like, okay, well, we can give people money and then they can find ways to have purpose and meaning with however they choose to use their time.
Well, I had a course in college about transitions to capitalism, about how Soviet economies transitioned to capitalism, and well, the way they were set up is that they actually had a guaranteed job. So I have to agree with Joan about how that's a capitalist sort of way. It's more socialistic, And capitalism will. Friedman, he supported basic income, and he was a major, capitalist proponent. So it just doesn't
necessarily line up. Yeah,
Mhm.
that's interesting.
I'm against job guarantees because it just seems to me like a bunch of make work, and we're just going to create random things for people to do so they can justify their existence. You don't need to justify your existence. You should just have a right to exist.
Here, here.
Yeah. So everyone's against the jobs guarantee.
We don't have enough disagreement yet.
Go ahead, Sultan.
I forgot something.
Oh,
Yeah.
I'd like to add something. By giving jobs to people, political party leaders, they could trade people before an election for
Right. Like it could involve corruption, kind of.
this
Yeah.
job, those jobs. But with basic income, they cannot do that because they have to give it to everybody. So
Right.
they cannot trade all the country. So
Yeah. Huh.
That's what Sultan was saying. In House of Cards, Frank Underwood, he wanted to create a America Works or AmWorks program, which is basically a job guarantee, and he wanted to do it to increase his election chances.
Right.
And so,
Yeah. So I mean, I think for both of these programs, there's an argument to be made that people can kind of use it for political, like, oh, you're promising everyone money, oh, you're promising everyone jobs, that kind of thing.
Right. But Sultan's point was more specific than that, right? Like.
Yeah, that if you create jobs, if the government is creating specific jobs, it's really hard to make those jobs efficient, and it's based more on bureaucracy and politics than it is on So the question is, like, I would say that the job guarantee proponents, Darrick Hamilton, would argue that there's plenty of really important work that needs to be done. We just need to pay people to do it. And he wouldn't want to create jobs that are meaningless. He wouldn't want make work jobs, like that kind of thing. But then the question is it even possible to implement this kind of program without having that kind of effect? And even if the government were really good at kind of figuring out what's efficient, if your program is designed to create jobs for the workers, then you're almost by definition, you're starting from a place of, okay, we need to come up with work for people to do. What work can we find for them to do? And that's not to say that all of the work they find is going to be worthless, but it's already inefficient because you're doing it in that order instead of saying, oh, there are things that we need done, now we need to hire some people. Like that's, like that corresponds with actually, hiring people because the work needs to be done and not the other way around.
Right.
Yeah.
Like there's this quote by Milton Friedman, how he was going to the site of I think it was like a dam and he was like seeing all these people are digging with shovels. Why don't you just give them spoons if you're just if the goal is to make jobs?
Right. Yeah, I've heard that one before. I don't know if that's a real quote.
Job will last longer.
But yeah, I mean,
for longer. Yeah.
It's that kind of thing, and like, I think there is plenty of valuable work to be done, and that work should be paid for. And of course, some jobs are not going to be created by the private economy. Some some things the government needs to pay for to get done, but that's still different from saying, oh, we need to make up jobs for people and then figure out how to make it efficient. Yeah.
Well, I mean, there's already an existing framework of what jobs there are and how people get hired or not, and whether or not there's enough jobs for enough people, all that stuff. And history shows that we're not very good at sorting out people into doing things that are needed, or they're in things that they don't need to do. Or I mean, it's almost like the jobs guarantee option would require so much fixing of things that are already not working very well. And it would be easier to just bypass that whole thing and do the direct money and not have to research. Because we're not doing it now. We're not giving people jobs that need jobs. We're not seeing where there are jobs that are needing to be done and putting people there. I mean, we already don't do that.
Well,
And that's a hard thing to manage.
yeah, go ahead, Richard.
if you give money to people, they'll be able to do the job, volunteer to do the jobs that they think that need to be done.
Yeah, and I would
That's
add,
an idea.
I would add that if people have money to spend, now there's money to be made in the economy. So you're a business. Oh, there are all these consumers that have all this money to spend. I want to profit. I think I have a good idea of what I can produce for these people that will be profitable, and I'll hire the right people for that. So it's that the jobs are serving the purpose of production for the consumers who have the money to spend, and that's what you get with a basic income. With a job guarantee, it's not like the jobs are really serving anything, or that determination has to be made kind of by the government, which is there's no way to for the government to ever know,
For
you know,
sure.
like
Right.
the fact that you've got all these different people in the economy making decisions about what they're experts on and what they think, you know, is most efficient for their business and stuff like that. There's no way you can replicate that by a few people in a government making decisions.
Right.
Now, there's certain things, of course, that the government needs to provide for people that won't be provided by the private markets, like infrastructure and that kind of stuff. But that's specific stuff, and you shouldn't do it like for the purpose of creating jobs. You create the jobs in service of what the government is producing or what the business is producing.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, even in a business setting, you can see that there are plenty of jobs within a business that are people are overworked, and they need other people to do that part of the job, but they don't hire them. But they're hiring in other parts of the company where they don't really need those people. They're just kind of sitting around because
Right.
they have certain things on paper, certain quotas or whatever
Right.
that they're adhering to. So it's never really efficient.
Yeah. Even when a company gets too big, like you're saying.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Like
the government. you
Like
know.
in BS Jobs, Graeber, he said that people create a feudalistic sort of situation where they feel important by having all these people underneath them,
That's
and then
right.
they can ask the people when to make sure that there's all these cost savings or whatever, so that they can feel like they're the higher ups can see that feel like they're doing something or whatever.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Because they have that many people under them.
Yeah.
I mean, when they were getting ready to do big layoffs at EMC, and my manager said, I tried to hide you, you know, because I had been away. So I wasn't attached to a particular department at that point. I was kind of in different aspects, going to different, I don't know, kind of freelancing within the company, even though I was full-time. And she said, I kept trying to put you in different cost centers to hide the fact that you weren't here for a long period of time. And also to make it seem like you were doing work that was necessary at that time. I mean, she was great. I liked her a lot.
Yeah.
But I mean, it also shows that
Right.
in companies and in government, hardly anything gets done on the basis of, well, this is the most efficient,
Right.
or this is the person that's right for the job. We're giving favors all the time. We're doing this. You know, it's not going to work out that way.
Yeah, and something that's interesting is that, you know, we talk about, so, you know, Sultan was mentioning that, you know, when the government creates jobs, that can be really inefficient, and we talked about that. But something that also happens is that the government uses economic policy, like monetary policy, to stimulate job creation in the private economy. And so a lot of times, you know, like you have the David Graeber type bullshit jobs where, you know, it looks silly. Just looking at it, it looks silly if you know, investigate it. You know, it's ridiculous. But then there are other jobs that might seem perfectly reasonable to the person working in them, perfectly reasonable to the company that hired them, and, you know, they look efficient and all that kind of stuff. But maybe the company shouldn't exist because it only exists because it could borrow money because the government wanted to create jobs in the private sector. So a lot of the private sector jobs are kind of created by the government as a way to get people working.
Yeah, like defense contractors.
But not even that kind of stuff, like monetary stimulus, like lower interest rates. Now every business can borrow more, and businesses that maybe shouldn't have been in business are now in business, you know, that kind of stuff. And when I look at something like a jobs guarantee, I think, well, this is just a continuation of the status quo, making up jobs for people to do, except now it's more explicit.
Right.
And maybe there are, you know, people who, even if you throw as much money at, you know, the financial sector as you can, you know, jobs still aren't created for those people, and maybe the job guarantee can kind of get past that and get more people jobs. But it's still, you're looking at it from that angle, from the creating jobs angle. So here's a quote from the article to get us started. So they talk about this guy. I forget his first name, but his name was Thompson.
Yovan or something.
Yeah. So in effect, Uncle Sam got Thompson a $9 an hour job, and if Democrats on the Hill have their way, Uncle Sam will, in the coming years, get a job for everyone who wants and needs one anywhere in the country for any reason. So a question that I have from this is, should everyone be working? Like, is that a best case scenario? I don't know that the answer is yes.
Well, I think you can't answer that without knowing some of the things we've talked about in this meetup before, like without knowing what the need is. You know, like, so if there's like I don't know, I kind of think of something that wouldn't be a total disaster, or that would be a disaster but not like a war. So I don't know if there's like an asteroid coming, or if something, you know, really happens problematic environmentally, and you really need everybody to be like putting society back together, or like combating this particular thing, and everybody's ingenuity and creativity and labor and time are like definitely necessary, to the point that that's more important than them being with their own kids. It's more important than them writing or doing anything creative in their own time. Like, this stuff needs to happen. Then yeah, I mean, that you do want everybody working, but it also will show up in a different kind of way. Like, it will be natural, the demand will be there for those people to be working. So it won't be this thing where we have to like think about where we could possibly use somebody, or like that kind of thing. So I think we're clearly not in that kind of situation now.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I noticed in the article is like they even talked about, I think you were talking about like mothers and stuff, and like this will be great for mothers, but it didn't really make sense, because like you're forcing those people who might want to be home with their kids or doing something else to also be doing this kind of job. So if everybody's working an outside job, that means there's less time for things that aren't currently considered like paid work, which might still be really valuable, like volunteering, being with kids, doing creative things, helping taking care of your parents, whatever it is.
Intellectual development,
invention, all sorts of different kinds of things. So there's opportunity cost, is I guess what I'm saying.
That's especially a sharp blade for feminism in the 70s, where the whole idea was that women needed their own identity, and the identity was through work.
Right.
Was through
it's
a
so
job.
interesting. Yeah.
So a lot of women tried to do that. I mean, they tried to do both things.
Right.
When really, that's such work to bring up children. I mean, that's a full-time job. That's not just a cliche. That's a reality. And it's often much more meaningful than any of the bullshit jobs that you could get. So there was a real disconnect
it's
there
interesting.
about. I remember being with somebody who said, "Oh, I can hardly wait to get back to work," you know, and she had a toddler, and I said, "Oh, what do you do?" And she said, "I'm a bookkeeper." And I thought, wow, she thinks bookkeeping is more important than raising Sarah, you know. But it was her identity. She was a bookkeeper, not a mom.
Totally, yeah.
Isn't that weird, though?
It's interesting. Yeah, I mean, I think it's one of those things where, like, there was this sense that was your only option.
Yes,
we've also talked
one or
about.
the other.
And so now it's like it kind of shifted to this idea that the job was the only alternative.
Yes.
Also because, like, it's, as we've talked about, it was your only way of having economic freedom, with which comes the ability to leave an abusive husband, or the ability to do all sorts of other things.
A lot of trade-offs there.
The main reason is the economic freedom, not
exactly.
the career, the freedom.
Right. It was economic freedom, and it was also, you know, contribute to being in a better neighborhood and better schools, and, you know, adding to the income coming into the house, and a lot of stuff like that.
And for some people, like, it's a great creative outlet and all of that, and that
for
wasn't
some it is,
and that wasn't available before. So I think
and even if it's not, that identity as a worker can feel really good if your job is a source of something that's so beneficial to you. If it's a source of this income and a source of this freedom, and that kind of thing.
And a source of respect. Like I think the respect has been a big part of it. Like sorts of being respected and being seen as competent. Like if you have a role as someone who has a job, then maybe people listen to your opinions over the dinner table instead of just thinking like you don't know anything about anything.
I mean, that was the thinking, that if mothers had more of those things, there wouldn't be such a push to go out and continue bookkeeping.
Right.
And I mean, I think the same could be said of fathers, parents in general. You know.
That was just expected that fathers would.
So instead of giving everyone more freedom, we decided to suck women into this, like, having to get a job and go to work. And,
I mean, they did get more freedom, as in, like, they could get those jobs. So it's a little more complicated. But that's right. Like, there still wasn't the freedom of, like, not have. And now, like, a lot of people, they don't have the option to be at home with the kids. So, like, you did kind of
because you have to have a job
because of the economics, like, of needing to have the income. So it sort of flipped that a little bit too.
Any thoughts on whether everyone should have a job?
I mean, I think the issue of like, at home work gets really complicated. So it's like, well, okay, one way that you could solve it is you could designate that as a job.
Yeah,
and, like,
and
pay
that was
people
thought about a lot.
for
Yeah.
that.
Mhm.
And
Right.
that's, I like don't have fully formed thoughts about that, but
Right.
that's like
Mhm.
an additional piece of that. And there's also the fact that like not everyone wants to be home with kids 24/7. That like raising
Sure.
kids can be a really meaningful thing. And I also
Right.
know people who are like, yeah, I'm so glad that I can like hand my kid off to daycare or something.
Right,
If I had to be with them all of the hours they were awake,
Right.
I would climb a wall.
Right.
Like,
Even if they didn't have another job. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
so I think that there are a
Right.
lot of reasons why people potentially want to have jobs
Totally.
outside of the home.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's like, I love my kids. I
Yeah.
love them more when I only see them for 6 hours a day
Right.
instead of 16.
Yeah.
Right.
And if people have career ambitions, being like, okay, maybe you don't want to be out of the workforce for 18 years.
Right.
And partly that's a systemic thing,
Yeah.
the way in which we
Yeah.
are like, oh, you have this 18-year gap in your resume. That's terrible. But also, like, if you're in, healthcare or software or something where you're like,
yeah.
oh, if I were out of the loop for 18 years, like, I could,
Couldn't
I
get
would
back
not
in,
feel
yeah.
like I would be able to get back in. And
That's
so,
true.
Yeah.
That was a big
sense.
issue.
That makes a
Yeah.
lot of sense. Yeah.
So they sort of separate, from the like basic income jobs guarantee issue is also sort of, okay, are there ways that we can make work more flexible
Right.
for people? And
Right.
Yeah, it's a good point. Yeah, like even
Yes.
basic income doesn't address all of those things.
Yeah.
We don't talk about.
yeah, I mean, certainly it can potentially help that if
Right.
there's a new norm of like, okay, everyone has like, $20,000 a year, then it's like,
Right.
okay, maybe, we're paying people on a more like, well, we just only need you for like 17 hours a week.
Right.
Because
There might be more.
there's
of
not
that.
the same economic
Mhm.
model of like, okay, we're paying everyone for
Yeah,
at
exactly.
least 35 hours a week for
That's
a
right.
career job.
Yeah, that's right. So you might have more flexible hours. Could be more balanced in terms of like,
Yeah.
it often seems like for a lot of people working part-time when they have kids is the ideal for some people because it's like they're still home a lot but they're not home all the time.
But again, it doesn't address that career climbing aspect.
Yeah.
Where, I mean, if you're a lawyer or you want to make partner or any of the things that are time sensitive in careers, you're taking a big step out of that.
Yeah,
and you're not going to
totally.
be considered for that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's
Yeah, it doesn't address that.
No,
it doesn't address that.
doesn't.
That's true.
Well, yeah. I mean, I think there's always going to be some of that. There's always going to be these jobs where you can't really take time off to have a kid if you want to kind of stay in that career.
Right.
Right.
And that just might be part of the reality.
Yeah.
And I don't, like a basic income and a job guarantee are kind of, neither one is going to address that issue. And that's just like, the people who get those jobs are probably going to be the ones who like, they're okay with that decision.
Yeah.
Basic income might give people more freedom to not take one of those jobs. Like I think maybe for some people, those types of jobs are maybe their only option. And then
You mean the ones that require certain steps in the career?
yeah, like they're on a certain path or their area of expertise is, or their education is geared toward, being in they're going towards being a doctor or something like that, and that's their family pressure, and that's the way you are successful and that kind of thing. Whereas if you had a basic income and kind of the norms around that were different, then the only people who would be doctors are really the ones who actually want to like live their life that way. I think it gives people more freedom not to try to force themselves into roles that aren't the best fit for them. And I think basic income can also change a little bit what we think of as a job. So maybe you get paid $3 a week to do something that's really interesting to you that you maybe would have done for free or something like that, or like I think you'd see a lot more flexibility in getting other people to do things that they might not ordinarily be doing. Maybe you pay them, or maybe there's some other kind of thing. There'd be a lot more kind of freedom in the market for people to do what they wanted without these restrictions necessarily of like, well, if it's a job, then it has to provide like a certain benefit to you, and it's about this is how you earn your living, that kind of thing. And I think this is kind of where one of the ways where basic income and job guarantee kind of like pull in opposite directions. With a job guarantee, you'll see Darrick Hamilton talking about it. The way he talks about it, he says, like if we promise everyone jobs that pay like a living wage, then, employers won't be able to hire people for anything less than that. So you've kind of eliminated this whole segment of job. And it's kind of a similar effect to minimum wage, where you've eliminated a lot of possibilities in terms of freedom for people to do different things because you're trying to make the job be this thing that provides people with an amount to live on, that kind of thing. And then also to Elizabeth's point, basic income could potentially, maybe there are people who don't have jobs but also don't want to spend all their time with their kids, and maybe they want to go, rock climbing or do something creative or have time away. The basic income can accommodate those people by giving them the money to potentially afford for daycare. So they don't have to get a job as an excuse to be away from their children. They can just say, I kind of need some time away from my children, and that's an okay thing.
True.
So yeah.
Jobs and careers. I mean, it's jobs guarantee versus
career guarantee.
Yeah, I mean, when we talk about being a doctor, as you were saying, or becoming a lawyer, or anything that requires putting in a certain amount of time at a certain time. I mean, there's a point at which you can't drop out. You have to put in these successive years.
Yeah.
That's not going to be in a jobs guarantee.
Unlikely. I mean, there are certain jobs where, it requires a certain amount of dedication and focus, and you can't just take someone off the street and say, hey, you're a doctor now.
Right.
Right. And I think to play devil's advocate a little bit, Professor Hamilton would argue that, not everyone can be a doctor, but through his jobs guarantee program, you can find a job that's suitable for everyone and meaningful for everyone and provides them, with a decent standard of living.
And there's paid training I saw in the article.
Paid training, yeah.
Paid training.
Yeah.
Oh, and there's also Starbucks.
There's also Starbucks. But if we find a way to give everyone good jobs, then maybe we can replace all the Starbucks workers with robots.
Starbucks is a good job, and you can get college tuition. I mean,
are you being sarcastic?
No.
Okay. No, I know you can get. I know you can get solid college tuition.
I mean, it has benefits that allow you to progress in life.
Do you talk to people who work at Starbucks and they all feel really good about their job?
No, they just pretend that they're happy.
Right, because if they don't, they'll get fired, right? Yeah.
I think Alex was thinking good as in also takes more advantage of what's unique about maybe what people are able to contribute, which you could argue Starbucks does if it's about the interpersonal interaction and stuff like that.
Yeah, I mean, it's really vague what the jobs would be. That's the thing.
Yeah, and you can always come up with examples, and I'm sure Darrick Hamilton can come up with plenty of examples of jobs that need doing that are really important. And I agree with him. There are plenty of jobs that need doing that are really important, but let's create them for that reason, not because we're giving people some work to do.
Right.
Yeah. So let's watch a clip from the debate. Here we go. This works. Actually, no, I don't need to make it.
My concerns for universal basic income are not philosophical, but practical. It is the universal and the flat dollar amount of basic income that is inflationary and potentially inequality enhancing. Giving everyone in the economy the same income is the practical definition of inflation. Also,
really?
So giving everyone in the economy the same income is a practical definition of inflation.
What does that mean?
That seems inaccurate.
I mean, I think this is wrong. I think the point he's trying to make is that if you're only creating jobs for people who need them, then you're not spending as much additional money into the economy. Whereas if you're giving basic income to everyone that's the same amount, and assuming you're still giving poor people the same amount, now you're spending a lot more money into the economy, so therefore inflation. I disagree with this, of course, because when you give money to rich people, it doesn't really cause inflation because they're not spending their money on they're not going to, if you give Bill Gates an extra $20,000 a year, he's not going to suddenly start buying more consumer goods and putting pressure on the productive capacity of the economy or something like that. So I think when you give money to rich people, it's basically free. It doesn't change the amount of money you can afford to give to poor people without causing inflation. Go ahead, Richard.
Well, Marinescu or whatever her name is clarifies that later on that isn't inequality enhancing because of the progressive tax system. If they're still going to have that with basic income, that because if you if you give someone $20,000 or $12,000 or whatever dollars a year, this at least some of it is going to be taxed away, clawed back, as it will, and they're going to get negative some amount or only like $2,000 or something.
Yeah, that's right. We talked about that.
And what makes you think that a jobs guarantee won't be inflationary?
Right.
It's never addressed at all in the debate.
Yeah, and I think this is something they're kind of both wrong about. So I think his intuition is that it's less money, therefore less inflation. That's Darrick Hamilton's intuition.
What's less money?
Job guarantee is less money,
Okay.
less money being spent by the government. So therefore less inflationary. Like that's his lot, and that's like it makes intuitive sense, right? Even though that's not how money works.
If that's the key point that you're trying to make, couldn't you just try to like give a certain amount of basic income or money to people below us who would otherwise have had those jobs in the jobs guarantee?
Right. So this is the point that Marinescu makes that Richard just pointed out, where so they're both wrong, right? They're both wrong, and Hamilton is trying to argue that a basic income somehow goes to everyone and will be more government spending, but it doesn't have to. And then we'll see them talk about this. But Marinescu's counter argument is that, well, no, we tax the rich more, so in this program it'll end up being about the same anyway. Because you give the basic income to the rich, but then you tax them even more, so the net amount of money they get is negative. They're putting money into the system rather than taking it out. Both of them are wrong about this, and they both this is something they agree on that I think they're both wrong about. Now, they both say things in this debate that I think are wrong, and they both say things that I think are really right too. And I feel like almost if you took the two of them and put them together. And took all the things that the two of them were right about, they'd almost have a complete picture of how this is supposed to work. But maybe not this part. Maybe not the part about having to get the money from somewhere or something like that. Yeah. Anyone have any more thoughts before I play another clip?
No, maybe I'd just point out that it's interesting that we've talked before about distribution and how in particular distributing the money. I guess either job guarantee or basic income would do this, but distributing the money to people who don't have it right now has a different kind of effect on production. Yeah,
I mean, if your economy has the productive capacity to respond to additional consumer spending, then you can give money to consumers, whether it's through a job guarantee or a basic income. If you have room for more consumer spending, then you have room, and if you don't, then you don't. Taxing rich people is not going to somehow create more productive capacity in the economy because the rich people weren't going to be using up that capacity anyway. So here's the next clip, and this actually comes shortly after the last one.
Also, since by definition, poor people will spend their income on subsistence needs, while wealthy people can invest their income in asset-growing endeavors, the program can be inequality enhancing.
So this is interesting because he kind of directly contradicts what he just said.
What is he saying there? I had
That's
trouble
true.
hearing that.
That's interesting. He does.
Yeah, let me turn up the volume.
Well, no, I mean it's like
he said that. Do you mind if I just recap?
It's glitchy.
He said that
it's what?
poor
It's glitchy or something.
Yeah.
poor people are gonna spend their money on subsistence needs, whereas wealthy people are gonna spend their money on investments, and so by that token, he thinks that basic income would increase inequality.
Oh, I thought that's what he said.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
But what he said before was that basic income would cause inflation because you're giving it to everyone.
Right.
But now he's saying that, well, rich people aren't actually going to buy stuff. They're going to invest in financial assets. So then it wouldn't cause inflation because they're investing in financial assets rather than buying the things that other people could buy.
The focus is different now. It's about inequality.
Right. He's more kind of listing out the problems that he sees. So previously, just before this, he's saying it causes inflation because you're giving it to everyone. Mm-hmm. And now he's saying it causes inequality because the rich people are able to invest in financial assets. Mm-hmm. But what he doesn't realize is that his explanation for the second one contradicts his point in the first one, which is that rich people aren't actually buying stuff. They're just investing in financial assets. Therefore, their spending is not going to cause any inflation at all. So he might be right that it's inequality enhancing in that, poor people are buying stuff and they get the stuff and then they consume it, whereas the rich people are kind of saving it and getting richer. So that's true. It's unclear to me how much of a problem that is if everyone's getting all the things they need, is it a problem that rich people are saving more and more money?
Another thing that I would have thought would be more obvious to more people is, why would the jobs guarantee not have the same effect? I mean, I guess just because you're not giving money to the wealthy people.
Yeah. So his point, which is kind of consistent across both, is that A, you're not giving money to wealthy people, therefore it won't cause inflation because you're not spending more money. And B, you're not giving money to wealthy people, therefore it's not going to be inequality enhancing because they don't have any money to invest in additional financial assets.
Right. So I guess one thing I could say there, like, well, if you are concerned about inequality, I guess you could imagine the things we talked about with basic income, which is that the money that people are given for those jobs then gets spent and kind of make their way up the natural flow of the economy to the people who are at the top. Yeah. So it's not totally obvious to me that.
So that's true too. I mean, even if you're clawing back money from rich people so that the net amount that they get from an implementation of basic income is zero or negative, it doesn't change the fact that when consumers have more money to spend, that's more profit to be made by businesses. But yeah, if you have more customers who are able to spend more money, then you can sell them more stuff.
Potentially worth more than $20,000 a year or whatever to the top 0.1% or whatever.
Oh, sure.
So I'm not really sure.
Yeah, when consumers have more money to spend, then there's more money to be made in the economy, and the rich will get rich off the consumers like they're supposed to do because they're providing things that the consumers want.
All right, I'm going to say one more thing. Yeah, sorry, guys. And one more thing that I think I disagree with about his point about inequality is just that, like, if people's time is controlled as opposed to more free, you could think of that as more inequality inducing. Like wealthier people have more freedom in terms of how they use their time. They can quit their job, they can not work at all if they're really wealthy, they can do right. And so now you're like you're making sure that instead of having a basic income, people who are poor definitely don't have that option. Like, they have to work this job to get their money. So in that also real way, it's not dollar inequality, but in terms of like freedom inequality or how you use your time, I feel like jobs guarantee has a stronger effect on inequality.
But then you could argue that if you don't work for a living, you'll never get rich.
Unless you're already rich.
I know most people that are really, really rich. They've gotten that not through working their way up the ladder. They've inherited wealth or whatever.
Right.
But it's still true that at least the dream in America is that you can get rich, but you can't get rich if you're getting basic income. Right. You can only get rich if you're working.
That's true. But
you can still work if you get basic income.
Yeah, you can. But the incentive is much lessened.
Yeah.
Well, if you don't care about getting rich, then it's not a problem.
No, the incentive to work is lessened. Yeah, the incentive to work is lessened if you have the money. I mean, like the immigrant story of coming to America and starting with a nickel in your pocket and then, you're a billionaire. That's driven by more than, of course, needing money, but it's still, the main thing is needing money and wanting more money. I mean, if you've never ever known any really, really rich people, I knew one, and he was really concerned about the prices of things going up by 2 cents in the grocery store. And I used to think, how could he be that concerned about such little amounts of money? But then you could argue that he spent his life being concerned about those kinds of things. So
depends on how you make the money. I think, like, I know somebody who made a lot of money with a hedge fund, and I think that was a much faster thing. Like, he's super young, so he doesn't.
But somebody like Bill Gates, he's still working in a way, and the people that want to do what they're doing and also making money, it isn't just about the money.
So, something to keep in mind.
It's about the job. It's definitely about the job.
Well, sure, but something to keep in mind is that, the starting with a nickel thing and then working your way up.
Yeah.
If you're in an economy where there are opportunities to do that kind of thing and to make money in that way, then it's much more possible.
Right.
And if you have a basic income, then there's more opportunities to work your way up. Right. There's more opportunities to become an entrepreneur. There's more opportunities to spend your time the way you think will be most profitable in the long term, instead of just how you're going to survive for the next day.
That's a good point.
Yeah. And I'm concerned that, like, because there'd be an inevitable make work quality, like the jobs that are created to make sure to give people a job aren't necessarily going to be leading anywhere in particular. Yeah. But like you said, you don't have as much freedom to, like, take off time and learn something or start a business or whatever. Did you have your hand up or just?
I was just going to say the thing that Alex said. So about how, like, if you have a basic income, then you can be like, okay, cool. I'm going to save up to like borrow, to get a loan to like start a curry shop because I think that's what would be really successful in my neighborhood.
Right,
Instead of
right.
being like, cool, now I can be manager of this like recycling
Right.
plant, which is like not really what I wanted to do,
Right.
but like was the job guarantee job available.
Yeah, exactly.
to me.
Exactly, that's right. Yeah. Good point.
So here's another clip from the article. The most powerful think tanks on the left, including the wonkish Center on Budget and Policy Priorities.
I love that he uses wonkish.
Wonkish. She actually. This is
Sorry.
Annie Lowrey.
I
Yeah.
was better.
Like,
Yeah.
The politically attuned Center for American Progress and the Progressive Levy Economics Institute of Bard College have published jobs guarantee policies, or are planning to do so. A blue sky policy idea has become an animating policy mandate in a matter of months. So this is interesting. This is kind of speaking to the kind of sudden popularity of the idea of a jobs guarantee, especially among the left and the Democrats. And
Bernie Sanders, I see up there.
yeah, Bernie Sanders. Yeah.
Okay.
So it's an interesting question. Why was this the thing to take off? And I mean, like, basic income has gotten more popular kind of
Right.
over the last few years,
Right.
But it didn't have this sudden
Yeah.
like explosion
Good
that
question.
a job guarantee did this summer. Go
I
ahead, Bethany.
can't speak as much to why right this moment,
Yeah.
but maybe that has more to do with the common force behind basic income and jobs guarantee being more popular. But in terms of jobs guarantee, it seems to fit directly into the narrative we already have, which is like, how are you supposed to be doing okay in society? Like, you're supposed to be willing to have a job.
Right.
And so then it's like, wait a second, if people are willing to have a job and those jobs aren't even there, like, that's not really fair. Like, they're doing their part, where's the other half of like the social contract, as they talked about. And so it's just really easy it's a really easy, like you were saying at the beginning, Joan, it's really part of the way we already think.
Yeah.
So it's a really easy next step to think conceptually,
easier.
like, oh, people should be able to have a job because we tell people that's like what they're supposed to do, and you know.
Yeah, the something for nothing idea is just going to be a harder idea anytime. I mean, so this is not quite that.
Yeah.
At least people are doing something for their money. I mean, I think it's much more radical to think about doing nothing and getting money.
Right.
Much
exactly.
more radical.
Like Richard was saying, just like having a right to have a life. Or
yeah,
whatever. Right.
totally radical.
Yeah.
I like what Bethany said about opportunity cost. So if you're being forced to do a specific job, then you have to ask, not is this job doing something useful, but is this job necessarily more useful than what the person would otherwise be doing?
People never ask that question in these things. They like always say like, oh, well, it's sort of useful to pick up this trash or whatever. But like what Elizabeth's saying, like, what if it would have been way more useful to come up with this other business idea, or like to be raising your own kids, or whatever else it is? The opportunity cost is so important.
Yeah.
The basic income idea is much more idealistic and much more based in a belief in human goodness, I guess you could say. Optimistic.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, the question of human goodness, like, are they going to, be upstanding people if you give them a basic income and use it responsibly and stuff like that? I think that's not a question of, should we have a basic income or not? It's that if people squander their time and their money, maybe that just changes the amount of the basic income we can afford. Mm-hmm. So if people just kind of lie around like slugs and we actually needed them to be working, then, maybe the amount of basic income we can afford is a little bit lower.
Right.
But I'm saying that I think the philosophy is driving, it's driving decisions now between these two ideas.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I think being concerned that you're just going to lie around and stuff. Yeah, that's right.
Right.
I think that's right. And I think like at the heart of basic income is a sense of maybe not any particular human qualities, but like human deservingness, as Richard was talking about, like that you don't have to earn the right to have like a life, and it doesn't really matter whether you lie around or not. Like, this is your perspective, and you still kind of deserve to get whatever the economy can afford, and that's a different perspective than the one that's implicit in a way behind this perspective, which is that if you're not willing to work, you deserve to starve on the street, essentially. Like, they wouldn't say it that explicitly, but that's kind of the logic. It's like,
it is.
Some people say that explicitly. Not usually those on the left.
They do.
Go ahead, Richard.
It's actually part of the Japanese constitution. If you don't work, you won't have any sort of rights into it.
Wow.
I did not know that. That is interesting.
That applies to everyone?
So you're not like a citizen at all? You're not a
It's
citizen?
the culture. They
Pretty much.
Wow.
So do they not have parents who stay home with their kids, or is that an exemption? Or do you know?
I don't know.
Yeah, that's an interesting
Yeah.
question.
What is
Yeah.
that question?
And like people with disabilities.
What about people who
like,
stay home with their kids?
Oh.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Is that counted as like working for your rights? In
You
terms
still-
of
My guess is that they have exceptions.
Yeah.
Yeah.
they generally don't do children. The population is getting.
Oh, they don't have that many kids.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, that's true.
They don't have what?
That many kids.
Oh,
So
that's
somebody has to take care of them.
The ones that are there. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Let's watch another clip here.
Right into it, having Americans out of work does immense damage to the human spirit and it poses extensive cost to individuals, families, communities, and society as a whole. Yet the current
What?
Having Americans out of work does immense damage to the human spirit and imposes extensive costs to individuals, families, communities, and society as a whole.
Wow.
So the question is, why is that? Is it something fundamental to the nature of work? I mean, obviously, in today's society, if people are out of work, then they're poor, and of course you have all these problems. Now, his argument is that this is part of why a jobs guarantee is better than a basic income. But if you have a basic income, then it kind of changes, the context of what it would mean to be out of work, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
So, I don't know. Does anyone have any thoughts on that?
I wonder why he
Yeah,
thinks
Bethany.
that.
I guess just because. Oh, Elizabeth, do you want to go first?
It's like the sort of like toxic capitalism of like, but you only have worth and dignity if you're like
Yes.
doing
Right.
work.
Yeah,
And
Right.
that there's that like I think is bullshit, but that is
Right.
this really strong cultural force of like, it's so terrible that people are out of work because then they, in addition to like being poor, but what's really important is they don't have any dignity.
Yeah,
And-
exactly.
Right.
Exactly. Yeah, that's right. And there was a quote about that. There's one about like, oh yeah, the guy in the back of the trash truck, the guy anodizing the metals for the underground wastewater treatment facility, they're happy because they're doing something important, right? Yeah, like, which I don't disagree that people want to make contributions to their people around them and their communities and stuff like that. But I agree that that's like tied with paid work in this very strong way that I don't necessarily agree with.
So do we think that having people out of work would do immense damage if we had something like a basic income? Yeah.
It depends on what the person is doing. If they're not harming anyone, it doesn't matter what they're doing. That's sort of like the argument with legalizing drugs like marijuana or something. If they're not harming anyone, it doesn't matter what they're doing.
Yeah. And is he talking about having people out of work, period? Or, I mean, you say having people out of work with a basic income.
Sure.
What that seems like a different proposition than what he's saying, which is having people out of work, period. There's some sort of outrage behind that idea that he's proposing, that people out of work, will create, there'll be more criminals, there'll be, the fabric of society will be destroyed. It's a real moralistic tone to that, to his speech there. And I don't think he's saying people out of work who also have some basic income. He's just saying people out of work, that's a huge moral problem.
Right, but so Alex's question is trying to get at like what is the more I think
What is
it's
he?
like,
What
it's
is
sort of
that?
like so if we had a basic income, like is there
Would there
something
be-
else that would still
yeah,
be terribly
yeah,
wrong?
yeah. What
Or is
does-
it just that people are poor?
I just wonder what he thinks the big moral problem is, what the destruction of society consists of
I don't
without
know.
jobs.
So we actually met
We did talk
Darrick
to him.
Hamilton a couple weeks ago and
Okay.
talked to him for a little while.
Yeah.
The sense that I get from him is that he cares more about the people not having jobs suffering themselves from not having a job.
Suffering.
Like they are suffering. The jobless people are the ones who are suffering. Yeah, and he's very much concerned, with
From not having money?
like homeless people.
Well, I would say that it very much has to do with them not having money, but I think his argument goes
Deeper.
a little bit deeper,
I agree.
further. So I think there is some moralistic stuff in there, but he's more looking at like, okay, they're suffering along all these dimensions. Like, not only do they not have money, but they don't have purpose, and they can't, move up in society and that kind of stuff. And the question is, is all of that really due to a lack of job,
Yeah.
or is some of it kind of due to maybe a lack of money, and then also the way society treats people who don't have jobs, that kind of thing?
Yeah, I mean, they're separate in a way because, as you know, when you meet people, one of the first things they ask is, what do you do?
Right.
And what you do, what is your job, is such an important consideration, at least in America. Yeah. If you say nothing, then you're looked at in a different way. There's a stigma attached to that, and whether you have money or not has nothing to do with that. I mean, in fact, rich people who do nothing are kind of disrespected too. Yeah. So it's not really a money issue.
Yeah. So then a question we might ask is, do you address this by making sure they have jobs and forcing them to work, or do you address it by maybe changing the way our culture?
That's a bigger proposition.
Yeah. And I think if we had a basic income, if it was demonstrated that our society could afford to provide consumers with spending money,
right.
Then maybe some of our moral positions
Yes.
around this stuff, our expectations of people would start to shift.
I agree.
In response
it
to
would
that.
have to be proven, and that's the challenge, to be able to somehow prove it. I mean, they're doing small scale, like Stockton. That's one experiment that's going on. But it has to be proven. Yeah. I think it's ingrained. It's Puritan. It's America's roots.
Yeah.
The
People
work
have-
ethic.
People have to see it.
Yeah.
Looking forward to showing them. Yeah.
One thing I think
Right.
that you also point out a lot about specific programs. So, for example, about trying to infer from this recycle force to like a broader jobs guarantee effect is that sometimes you're seeing something that's not scalable. And what I mean by that is that if somebody right now has a job, it's kind of also an indication that they're higher up on the social ladder than somebody else. If you make it so that everybody has a job, that social benefit goes away. So if people are liking you because you're the one with a job and other people don't have it, that effect is not going to be there anymore. Like, if that's why you're getting more respect, because people know that not everybody has a job and you're one of them that does.
Yeah.
That won't scale to a jobs guarantee.
And if you're like judging people who don't have jobs, and then now there's a jobs guarantee program.
Exactly.
And you meet someone who has a job, but it's a jobs guarantee job.
Exactly. That's kind of what I mean.
Oh, well, this is the person who wouldn't normally have a job.
It depends.
Right?
It kind of depends on where the respect is coming from, and I don't really know. It could be that it could be that if everyone had a job, everyone would have that respect. But it could also be like what Alex was saying, is like people are making distinctions.
Absolutely.
And like if you got a jobs guarantee, then they would make the same distinction, and people would just feel bad about themselves if they had those certain kinds of jobs. Which you also see now too.
People who get welfare feel ashamed sometimes about getting welfare, or
exactly,
or even the distinctions. What do you do? Well, I'm a professor. What do you do? I'm a custodian.
Right.
And those are distinctions that people feel respect or not. So
and this is an important difference between a jobs guarantee and a basic income. The basic income does go to everyone.
Exactly.
Yeah,
so getting a basic income is not. It's not like, oh, you have a jobs guaranteed job. You shouldn't normally have a job. Oh, you get a basic income. So do I.
And you're doing this.
Everyone gets basic income.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So
and you may be working on top of that.
Right.
But that's your choice.
Right.
Yeah, and a basic income won't get rid of these kinds of social distinctions that people make, but they certainly won't. It won't add to it because it's something that everybody's getting.
Right. Yeah.
So it doesn't make it worse. But yeah, a lot of the anecdotal stuff in the article has to do with like him feeling a sense of self-respect or respect from other people. But I just wonder how much of that is scalable if you had a jobs guarantee,
right?
Or not. Yeah, and like now it's not guaranteed to him also, so there's something he's kind of proving about himself, seemingly by actually having a job and holding on to a job. If it's guaranteed, you're not really proving anything about yourself. So again, it could not have that kind of respect associated with it anymore.
Yeah, and how do you ensure that? I mean, like, say it is a necessary job and someone got it through a job guarantee. How do you ensure that they have the incentive to do the job well?
I mean,
if they can't lose it. I mean, like, or maybe they can lose it and they just get a different job guarantee job. I mean, Yeah, I mean, it's kind of a breakdown of incentives if you're just providing it to people directly.
And I mean, also, like, they don't necessarily have to be interested in that particular job at all, like Elizabeth was saying. So.
Yeah, and I mean, I think, when you talk to Professor Hamilton, I think he'd say, we want to provide jobs that are meaningful for people, that do provide dignity, that people will be motivated to do. and he has a whole plan that he's written out and worked on with some other people, and he really believes that this is something that can be
Realize.
that can be realized. And a lot of the concerns that we bring up here, a lot of the concerns, he's heard a lot of them before.
Yeah.
And he thinks of that as kind of like an erosion of his ideal plan, which would actually be a good plan, and you have to prevent people from kind of like corrupting it and that kind of thing.
That's fair. Yeah.
But I would come at it from the point of view of saying like none of this is kind of realistically achievable. And with a basic income, it's not like we need people to be doing something to receive it. It's kind of a separate thing.
Yeah.
What we need you to do is take the money.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The money.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean this whole idea that he wants the jobs to be meaningful. Who makes that decision? And,
Right.
And how many jobs are there out there that are meaningful? I mean, that's a really big question.
There's
And I'm surprised that he just kind of pushes that off as one of his things. Oh yeah, they'll be meaningful.
Yeah,
How?
and the funny thing is that there's no real way to answer that question except by, giving consumers money to spend and see what kind of work is demanded
Right.
and what kind of work people are inspired to do,
Yeah,
or how much they
yeah.
need to be paid to do the work and that
Yeah.
kind of thing. Like
Right.
the answer to that question can kind of only come from markets,
Right,
right?
right.
And then part of the answer to the question can come from like governments needing, like I said before, governments need to spend on certain things, but it's not about starting at the jobs and looking at the jobs. It's about starting at, well, what do we need to produce? What do we need to make happen here? And then see what jobs emerge from that. Yeah.
I think one thing just to
Yeah.
one thing that I haven't mentioned is that if I were just describing, or if I were comparing a jobs guarantee to like the status quo, the comparison would be a lot harder. And if I had to vote right now, I might think that like a jobs guarantee would be better than a status quo. Like then
status quo.
like what we have now, which
Okay.
is no basic income and
Right.
no jobs guarantee. Because like you're at least giving people income somehow.
It's better than nothing.
Yeah, it
Sure,
might be
yeah.
better than nothing.
Yeah.
It is kind of what I'm
Yeah, I
like,
agree.
which just to kind of, because we met him, and I think one of the things that motivates some of the people behind a jobs guarantee is like the practicality of like this might be an easier thing politically because it's closer to how people already think. Than something like a basic income.
Practically. What does Andrew Yang want? Is he
Basic
He
income.
wants basic income.
It's not, but
Yeah.
not jobs guarantee. It's
No.
but it's paid.
But he is
for-
very kind of jobs oriented. He very much emphasizes the amount of jobs that will be created by basic income.
Oh,
Yeah.
interesting.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
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 I don't know. It's not really that relevant because we're doing the other kind of comparison, but I think that for like you were saying, like when he's saying like people who are jobless and stuff, I think the key comparison that a lot of people arguing for jobs guarantee are making is like status quo versus jobs guarantee instead of basic income versus.
Yeah, it's not about whether or not they have enough money to live on. It's whether or not they're meeting the expectations of society in having a job.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So is it better or worse than the status quo? I mean, I think that's really, really hard to say, and it depends on, how close can you get to Darrick Hamilton's ideal jobs guarantee,
and how much would it like mess up the markets and have externalities I can't think about that would be bad for everybody. It's really hard for me to assess it.
It's hard to say.
It's hard for us to say. You might be able to, but I mean, for society, it would certainly be better. There'd be fewer homeless people. There'd be fewer poor people. I mean, just
Crime would
on
go
that
down.
level, it
Yeah,
would be
that
better.
kind of thing.
I mean, would there be? I mean, who qualifies for a jobs guarantee? Is it a resident, or is it like what if it's an undocumented immigrant and
Oh, that's a whole other.
Well, yeah, I mean, like
Right.
you can ask about these questions.
Yeah.
I mean, you can ask the same questions about basic income, and I would say that a basic income should be at least to everyone who's physically residing in the country. But jobs guarantee. Yeah, I mean, I think Darrick Hamilton would say that he would want undocumented workers to get the jobs guarantee as well. That's something that's really hard to do. It's hard to give a basic income to. It's hard to do anything for the benefit of undocumented workers. But yeah, go ahead.
Actually, he says that he wants immigration reform and that people with green cards should be able to get it, but without the immigration reform, there would they would be ineligible. And it was the same thing that Marinescu or whatever her name is says, something similar.
Marinescu, yeah, okay. Yeah, and then it's these questions of if you raise if businesses can no longer hire people for less than whatever the jobs guarantee pays, are you damaging what we can produce for people? Are you hurting businesses and by extension hurting consumers?
Yeah.
Go ahead, Richard.
It said that in the article that people would the business owners would just go after the subsidized employees, and then they would push the other people out of the market, and then there would be a whole bunch of subsidized labor throughout the economy.
Why would they push the other people
I think that makes
out of
sense.
the market?
Because they would actually have to pay the other people more, but the subsidized people, they would just have to pay them 20% or something like that.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, so then businesses would have to learn to play the game of how do I get the jobs I want to hire for covered by the jobs guarantee? How do I make my employees job guarantee employees?
Wow. Harris said that they should be subsidized, and that's how the new system should be, or something like that.
Yeah, but all of this it makes things complicated.
Yeah.
And it's unclear to me how it would all shake out, because you're kind of taking away a lot of the market incentives. If you have any business anywhere and you can get kind of subsidized employees or that kind of thing, then you're less able to make efficient calculations, cost benefit calculations of
I would assume it would be more of like what you were talking about, Joan, like why is this person in this job? Like everything seems to be kind of bloated and inefficient in the company, which in the end, like I guess why that matters is people's time being wasted, all those employees, and also like you said, like maybe we can actually produce less for the consumer or produce it less efficiently if we take more natural resources to do it, or all those different kinds of things.
And then, it could go the other way too, because, the job guarantee employees might be cheaper because they're subsidized, but they also might be really bad employees.
Right. So, you have to make that
businesses might
calculation.
avoid hiring the jobs guarantee employees. And then the jobs guarantee program is going to have a hard time figuring out how to place people in jobs if everyone's avoiding, getting those workers.
And then there's going to be a huge stigma, because any job that takes them is going to be one where it doesn't matter what kind of employee you are.
Right. And then the businesses that are comfortable, like what Bethany said, the businesses that are comfortable hiring jobs guarantee employees are going to be the ones where the jobs are just really, boring, crappy, repetitive, whatever.
And it doesn't matter if you quit, and it doesn't matter if you show up.
Right.
And it, like,
so then how does the job guarantee program fulfill the promise of meaningful, jobs that everyone feels good about, and that kind of thing, right? So it's kind of like you can imagine, these ideals that, Professor Hamilton might have, and then you can imagine how they would kind of unravel if you tried to implement something like this. Go ahead, Richard.
There's also a whole issue of corruption in the jobs guarantee sort of program. Like, if you're having all these subsidized employees, then you have an incentive to get all these subsidized employees. But if you're someone turning into a horrible entrepreneur and just charging all this money out for doing like half jobs or whatever.
Yeah.
And then there's they talked about how in the 70s how they dipped into the program to get money to pay for their public employees, while not actually providing jobs for people. It's just a whole bunch of issues that people skirting around the edges of the program.
I was also just thinking about dignity, and I was thinking about how, for me at least, there's a kind of dignity in like what people value in a job, if you are getting paid for it, is like whatever you're producing for them that they think is valuable. With a jobs guarantee, the criteria for whether you would keep the job would have to be what to me would seem like more babysitter-ish, which is like, I don't know, like there have to be some threshold, like how many times can you not show up before you're not allowed to have the job? Okay, how many times can you... So there'd be some criteria, but they're not really the things that are about like how much value are you producing, because it doesn't matter how much value you produce, you're guaranteed a job. But there would be some criteria, and maybe there'd be drug testing, and maybe there'd be this and that, and like it could just end up going in this direction, because they would have to decide, they can't force a company to have any employee who never shows up.
Right.
You know, so they'd have to like have all these
Yeah, a lot of
babysitting
rules.
kinds of
Oh,
rules
yeah.
to decide whether you're still eligible for this money
Right.
via this job.
Right.
That wouldn't even be about the quality of your work directly. It would be about all these social judgments, like we care about
Absolutely.
drug use, we care about
Right.
this or that, and like
Right.
that could be a negative consequence too.
Yeah, Richard.
Yeah.
Republicans are. It said in the article that Republicans are against it, but you can infer that they don't like the nanny state, but they also like drug testing and things like that. So that's sort of like nanny state, so it's contradictory.
Yeah,
I don't
exactly.
really get that.
Yeah.
They like drug testing.
They like drug testing.
They do.
Yeah.
I think that it's kind of unclear to me which party likes more or less kind of government involvement. It's kind of like which kind.
Yeah, I think the different parties like different kinds of government involvement, and certainly the mantra on the right is smaller government, that kind of stuff. But they're not for smaller government for the things they care about,
Right.
the things that are their issues. And that can involve
Subsidizing companies.
Right.
What's that?
Subsidizing companies, like for oil and things.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that kind of stuff.
I think all of this grows. What I was talking about kind of grows out of your point, Richard, which is like inherent in the idea of a jobs guarantee is that you have to earn this money by
Yes.
being the right kind of person.
Right.
And so like that's going to be even more specific than the job. It's like they said, like you have to show up to the job. What if you have mental illness? How do they decide? Do they give you an exception? Like it just seems like this is going to be really hard to figure out what the rules would be to give you the money or not. And they're kind of judging you as a person.
With it.
Right,
Yeah.
right. And then do you have a different standard if like you
Yeah.
have these different disabilities, and how does that work? And it's like it just becomes so complicated to try to make people earn the money in this way by being the right kind of person.
Yeah.
Any
I'm
more?
that kind of person.
I guess it's to say one more thing about that is like because fundamentally it's not you getting the job is not being valued with respect to the output of the job.
Right.
It's being something about you as a person meeting the right criteria or something like that.
Right.
It's strange.
Yeah.
I guess that's the priority, but
Yeah.
that's very strange.
Any thoughts before I move on to the next clip? Okay.
I wanted to say something about giving people money without restriction.
Yeah.
I mean, not the basic income level, but I think it applies. I think we're talking about Pope Francis, and he came out with a statement about giving beggars money without worrying about what they're going to spend it on. That it's not up to you to judge their lives or what they need the money for.
Right.
And just give them the money.
Right.
Yeah.
And don't try to track what they're doing or tell them what to do with it. And I feel like that's the simplest thing to do with basic income. Just give people money.
Right.
I think that's right.
I mean, all these other things that come up around it are just creating another whole layer of kind of moralistic policy making and rules and political problems. And I mean, what's wrong with just giving people money? That need, I mean,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, and I think Pope Francis would say that you shouldn't judge people, but he would also say that God would judge them for not getting a job. He's very, very pro jobs. He thinks everyone should have a job. Oh yeah, he's very much on the not on the basic income side, but probably more on the job guarantee side.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. But he would want people not to be judging.
Right.
I think that's right.
I think that particular sentiment applies here, even if his overall things don't.
Right.
Yeah.
All right. Let's watch another clip here. We get to hear from
Ioana
Marinescu.
So, I just want to respond to the idea that's been brought up that the universal basic income by definition is the same for everyone. That is true with respect to what we're giving people, and I think that is, from a philosophical perspective, a very important aspect, because it is the way in which we all have a certain right, and the right is the same for all. However, once you consider how this right is financed, then the picture changes in terms of the net. Because basically, if we're going to finance something, say through a form of progressive taxation, high-income people pay way more into the scheme than what they're getting out.
What? They're way into what?
Paying way more into the scheme than what they're getting out.
Who is?
Rich, high-income people.
So this is Richard's point, that if you funded it through taxes, like progressive taxes, then if you netted it out, you're actually not giving the basic income to wealthy people. You're actually taking more than they're getting. Yeah.
Right.
So
this is almost the point that the effect on inflation is going to be exactly the same between the two plans, assuming assuming that the actual distribution of money to people is identical.
Okay.
Of course, this is also the thing that I said they were both wrong about, that you could give money to the rich people and it wouldn't change the amount of money you could afford to give to the poor people without causing inflation. Yeah. So I don't know. Anyone have any more thoughts on this or questions? Yeah, Richard?
How about with like the quantitative easing? It caused massive increases in the amount of like stocks and things like that.
Right.
So it could, giving money to the wealthy could increase the value of those stocks.
Yeah, I think that's right. When we talk about price level and inflation, what we usually are thinking about is consumer prices. And we don't factor in like stock prices and stuff like that. If you give money to rich people, well, the amount of money that you're giving to rich people, the basic income is maybe a lot of money to people like us or to people who are poorer than us. But it's not going to be a lot of money to people who are super rich. So it's not necessarily going to change that much about how much they're spending, even in terms of buying financial assets like stocks and bonds. But the other thing that's really important to recognize with basic income is that if you increase the level of consumer spending, that and you keep that steady, then that also allows the central bank to raise interest rates. And when the central bank raises interest rates, as we have seen recently, that can allow stock prices to come down, which is not necessarily a bad thing if the stock market crashing doesn't actually hurt consumers, hurt Main Street that much, which would be the case if you had a basic income, because they'd still be getting their basic income, and maybe some rich people would be losing their investments in the stock market, that kind of thing. So even if you don't tax the money back from the rich per se, the basic income does allow us to tighten monetary policy and reduce the size of the private financial sector, help stock prices come down, that kind of thing, which is a little bit like taxing.
Hope stock prices come down. I mean, you say it like it's a good thing. Everybody's so freaked
I
out
do
about
say it that way. Isn't that funny?
Well, wait, I had two things. I guess one thing is that would a jobs guarantee also have some of that effect, because it would get incomes to people and keep prices stable that way?
To the extent that the jobs guarantee boosts consumer spending just the way a basic income would, it would have exactly the same effect, which is also why you don't need to tax anyone to fund a jobs guarantee.
Right. So then another question, I guess another maybe rephrasing I was going to say is, like, according to how you think about things, it seems like income is getting to like everyday consumers, but only through probably like pushing a lot of income actually into the hands of wealthier people via like quantitative easing and things like that, or do you not put it that way? Kind
of the way we do it is we force money into the financial sector, and we put so much in there that some of it has to trickle out and create jobs, and then consumers kind of get money that way. So you've got this kind of like growing bubble in the financial sector, stock prices going up and up and up and up, and all of that. And you don't need that anymore as much if you have a basic income.
I'm just thinking about it.
Yeah, so it's not exactly a tax, and this isn't exactly what's funding the basic income, but it allows you to ease up on some of that kind of ever perpetual stimulus on the private financial sector.
That's fair. Although I guess it's hard to weigh that, if you are concerned about inequality, it's hard to weigh that against like the amount that the consumers having more income that then flows up to businesses.
Yeah.
That would be more sensitive to production.
Yeah, I think the main thing that it does is it aligns, so since consumers have more money to spend under either a basic income or a jobs guarantee, it aligns the profit motive of businesses to say, hey, we want to make stuff that really benefits consumers, get consumers to spend their money with us. So now when businesses are profitable, it's actually aligned with what's good for the people.
Right.
Today, it's not as much that way, or not as much as it could be, because sometimes the best way to make money is to, invest not in real productive capital and machines and that kind of stuff, but to
stock buybacks and things.
Stock buybacks or other ways of investing in the financial sector and hoping for a bigger return than you could get from making stuff for consumers that they don't even have the money to buy, that kind of thing, or investing in capacity to make stuff for consumers that they're not going to have the money to buy. Yeah.
I forget if you were there when we were asking Alex, like, with the basic income under your ideal economy, what would you think people should invest in?
Yeah, no, that was at a party, wasn't it?
Oh, maybe it was.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It turns out we talk about this in other places. Yeah.
What should we invest in now?
Yeah, and what you said, well, you can answer, but it kind of releases conversation.
I mean, I think investing in real production that benefits the consumers, because the money's all going to be coming from the consumers. So you want to invest in, a business that's going to be really successful or something like that. And maybe you're still buying stocks, but you're not just like playing the stock market. You're like, this business is really going to like do something great for people. Therefore, I want to invest in this. I want to buy stock in this business. And maybe you might start seeing stocks paying dividends more. So when the business profits, those profits somewhat get distributed to the shareholders, the owners of the business. And those profits are coming from consumers and coming from producing things that consumers actually benefit from, or providing services, that kind of thing.
I just thought it was an interesting telling answer in terms of your point, which is that like the thing that would, the profit margin, the thing that would be making you money would be more closely tied to production that's actually benefiting people.
Right.
Right.
What would be a good example of a business like that?
I think
Could be anything, I guess. So it could be solar energy, could be like your courier system, could be anything that you think.
So, but in a way, it's driven by your ideal of what should be happening. I mean, it's not driven by what usually is driving people to invest in stocks. Like, this stock is going to go up.
Well, no, I think he's saying that is what would make you money.
Right. So it's like, why is this stock going to go up, or why is this business going to be profitable? If the answer is they're doing something directly for people, they're producing something or providing something, or something like that.
Yeah, I don't know if people think that way right now. I mean,
they don't. I mean, there's a big trend of passive investing. So you invest in an index fund, which is just an average of all the stocks. Yeah.
I still think in your new universe, you'd want a similar kind of thing, because it's so hard to pick a specific company. But it's just like what you'd be indexing would be productive companies that are like helping people.
Right. I think also there's this kind of expectation that if you're upper middle class or whatever, that you invest your money and get some kind of return on it or that kind of thing. I think if there's a basic income, there's going to be kind of less of that expectation. And then the people who are investing are the ones who are interested in, having a business succeed and, that kind of stuff. It's going to be much, much more oriented towards the real productive economy, that kind of stuff. So, but I mean, I think it's hard to say exactly.
Right.
I think once you have the basic income and once consumers have all this money to be made and there's profit to be made off of consumer spending, or there's more profit to be made off consumer spending, you kind of see how things shake out. And, initially it might cause the entire stock market to crash or something like that. But then after that, it's like what's left is like, interesting stuff.
There might be more interest on the part of people who are getting basic income in how does the economy work. I mean, most people have no real idea. They have their investments. They have a financial planner. They don't really look into what that person's doing for them. So, and so what if they have extra money? They might be interested in finding out more about what to invest in. Yeah.
So I think it's important that the economy work even in a world where most people don't understand it.
Right.
But certainly, if you had a basic income, that gives more people the freedom to think about different kinds of things. Not specifically the economy, but like any kinds of things. So you're going to have maybe more people who are experts on more different kinds of things. And I think that's a good thing. But it's also okay, like everyone's kind of like has their own area of interest and they might not know how other stuff works, and that's fine too. Yeah. Go ahead, Sultan.
I think it's could help to reduce the average ignorance because people would could have time to reading more, watching more, understanding how world or the universe. Even most of them they don't have time to learn this kind of things.
Right.
Yeah.
This is also my own experience. I had more time after quitting my job. During the 2 years, I learned lots of things, and I was shocked for some of them. How I couldn't know that. How I couldn't know.
Right.
Because I didn't have time. Really. After the hard working, when you get home, you want to sleep. So by reducing average ignorance, I think also world would be a more peaceful place because people don't know what is happening on the other countries. They don't have time to travel, time to
Right.
read.
Yeah, that's a good point. That's a good point. And it kind of relates to things I think people were saying about like, yeah, just people's time being so valuable.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the freedom to be more civically engaged.
Right.
The freedom to participate in the governance of just more involvement of the people, I think, would be made possible by something like a basic income.
Right.
When we talk about, rich people having all this money to spend to influence politics, but no amount of taking away that money is really going to help people who don't have the freedom to spend their time being involved and being engaged. Right. And basic income can make a difference.
And this, I guess, goes back to my point about the opportunity cost of forcing people to have jobs. Just like, it just seems like a crime if the work doesn't really need to be done to kind of make people go in for 8 hours in the day instead of doing these other things.
Right. And, Darrick Hamilton would come back and say, but the work does need to be done.
Right.
And, it's just
then I think your point is really on point there, which is to say, like, okay, if you think there's work that needs to be done, try to get that work done as efficiently as possible. If that means full employment, okay, that means full employment. But if you're going in with the expectation that you need to employ everyone, you're working backwards, and then it's very unlikely that you're going to be actually doing things efficiently. The universe would have to be such that the exact amount of work that efficiently needs to be done lines up with the exact amount of people. And it just doesn't make any sense that would be the case. That's just so improbable. And so I think one nugget that, like, I imagine could be going on in practice with the jobs guarantee is like maybe there is more stuff that we would want the government to be funding. Like I would think there's more infrastructure, there's more other things like you've mentioned that government funding would be good for. And so this would be like a motivation or an excuse to do some of that. But I think it would overreach that and like probably do a lot of inefficient stuff too.
Yeah.
In House of Cards, they had an interview with 2 senators or something like that, and one of them said, "My park has never been cleaner," or something like that. And then the other one said, "My daughter's my grandchild is in daycare, and they hired 3 more monitors or whatever, and there's more child interaction, and so they have a better outcomes or something like that." And so that's something that you might want to have the child thing and maybe the parks to some degree.
Right. Yeah. I think there's lots of stuff like that that's super valuable, and I just agree with Alex that you want to be thinking about the outcome you want, like the clean park, and doing that as efficiently as possible. Not thinking like, ooh, what's the maximum number of people we could make come in every day to clean the park, but rather like, how do we get the park clean as efficiently as possible, maybe with as few people as possible.
Maybe with a park Roomba.
We don't quite have that yet. But yeah, exactly. Like, so that those people can use their time some other way if it's not needed for the park. And if it's needed, then I suspect, and like, I know it's not always easy to tell if you have a bullshit job, but like, I suspect there's also some influence of whether you're genuinely contributing. Like, if you can see that your full effort seems to be actually needed, like you can't just take many breaks and that doesn't matter in terms of like cleaning up the actual park, then you're actually contributing to cleaning up the park. And that has more dignity too than like a job where you can kind of tell you're not being used efficiently.
If you got your job through a jobs guarantee program, then that's kind of a strong signal of something.
But even now, when you talk about like some of the stuff that trickles down, like I think people can somewhat tell sometimes. Like
sometimes, I think there are times when people can't tell at all. There are people who feel like their jobs are very important, and it is because it is important to the company, right? The job may be very important to the company, but the company maybe shouldn't exist.
That's a good point.
Because it was brought into existence by monetary policy that allowed them to borrow really cheap or something like that.
That's hard to tell.
So you can't see at the kind of approximate level, but ultimately the job existed for make work reasons.
And you can do some of that. I mean, sort of with jobs guarantee jobs, like you could do a sort of framing of like, like the government really wants to invest in solar energy, and so even though like private industry like doesn't want to take this risk, like the government thinks this is really important, and so there are ways like I don't think that you would necessarily be able to be successful with like getting an additional 9% of the population employed in those kind of jobs, but you definitely could frame it in ways that people might feel like maybe like what I'm doing doesn't feel super useful, but it's part of like it matters for the company, and like if the company
As a mission,
feels
that's
important. That it's
yeah.
like, oh, okay, I'm part of this. Because often, like, a lot of people I know feel like, okay, yeah, like, my job is important in the company, but like, do I really like share the values of the company I work for?
Right.
Not necessarily, but like, this is the job that I can get. And so if you frame it sort of like, oh yeah, this is, we're doing like, a daycare or like solar energy or something, then it could be like, oh, okay, yeah, I really believe in this mission.
That's a good point. Yeah, so some of them people might be more into them than standard jobs if they had like social missions more often or something.
Certainly, yeah. I mean, there's ways to make people believe that what they're doing is important. The easiest way, of course, is to have it actually be important at the level of the company, like what I was saying before. But I think you're right, Elizabeth, and I think it might even be the case that for some people that's what they need. They need someone coming in and telling them that they're doing something important and have that structure and that purpose and that motivation. But I don't think that's for everyone. And I think like, maybe after we have a basic income, there are some people who are really unhappy, and we can look into ways of providing them meaning and purpose. And maybe for some of them that means making up work for them to do and convincing them that it's important. But
there's a lot of other ways that you can have that structure. There's like church or other organizations. There's volunteer organizations. There's like
sports teams.
There's like a lot of different kinds of organizations that aren't just like the way we think of work.
Yeah.
Today, that I think people could voluntarily join if they get benefit from that.
Yeah. So here's another quote from the article. This is Cory Booker, who's the congressman in New Jersey. Yeah. So he's a pro jobs guarantee person. We have been a society for generations that has had this fundamental belief that if you're willing to work hard, if you're willing to put in the grit and the struggle, you should be able to thrive and make it in America, Booker told me. When you have the kind of societal abundance that we have, if you're willing to work, you should have a shot at economic stability and the American dream. We do not believe we should leave people behind the ravages of unemployment and poverty. It's interesting how he just like really ties in, like, if you're willing to work, you deserve things if you're willing to work. And we saw that, I think, with Chris Hughes. He uses the term basic income to describe what he's doing, but he's really like, everyone who's willing to work deserves to be taken care of.
That's the moralistic
income guarantee.
Income guarantee. Yeah, and this is just like, we have been in this society for generations. With this fundamental belief that if you're willing to work hard, you deserve to have an income. But is that the kind of society we want to be in? I don't think so.
Right.
Yeah.
It's really changing. And that moralistic tone doesn't really help change things to keep up with what's going on technologically, people losing their jobs, whatever's happening in society isn't helped by this clinging on to the moralism of having a job. It really isn't.
Yeah.
You should have looked at the next paragraph right there. But guaranteed, read that one.
But guaranteeing every American a job means guaranteeing every American a job. Guaranteeing every American a job means guaranteeing every American a job. It means countering the job losses caused by recessions and automation and globalization 1-to-1. It means finding work for people in every town in half a continent. It means accommodating the homeless, the violent, the drug addicted, and the illiterate in the workforce.
Wow.
So, I mean, there's this question of, are there people out there who really even should be working? Are they the best workers? If they have violent tendencies or something like that, I mean, like, well, maybe it's okay that they're not, part of the workforce. Or, but I mean, you can also say, like, if there are a bunch of lazy people out there, do you really want the lazy people to be in the workforce?
Right.
And if you give everyone a basic income, then the lazy people can all quit the jobs, and the people who are left are the ones who actually want to be doing the work, and that can be better for everyone too.
It's so paternalistic in a way too.
Yeah.
I mean, there's my brother, 50 years ago had injuries and had to be in what was called a pride workshop. So they'd bus people to this facility where they did this sort of piecework that it wasn't connected to anything really. It was just busy work. And they all had disabilities of one sort or another, and it was a way to. The name of it was Pride Work. I mean, the idea was that just
is
doing
it pride a sin?
what?
I've heard that somewhere. Anyway, go ahead.
You've heard
Sorry,
what?
yeah.
Pride.
It's
One of the seven deadly sins. Pride.
Oh yeah,
yeah.
it is.
Yeah.
But the idea that just doing something, even though it doesn't add up to anything, and they don't know whether it does or not.
Right.
And most people don't who work in factories anyway. I worked in a missile factory at Raytheon. I didn't even know what I was making. It was a little circuit board thing.
You worked in a missile factory?
I did in college. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. So, but the whole idea that pride comes from doing something, even doing something with your hands, simply.
Right.
And I don't know. I mean, I don't think that's going to go away. I think it's embedded.
So
Just lying around, you said, like a slug.
Yeah.
Nobody's ever going to really accept that. I don't think they are.
So
They're not going to accept it.
So here's a question.
Yeah.
Actually, I want to go to Elizabeth first.
Okay.
I was going to ask, when you say nobody's going to accept it,
Yeah.
like, who's the nobody? Because the people who are lying around as slugs, I think, have accepted.
Even they probably look down on themselves. Even they are mad that they're not doing stuff, some of them.
Some of them, maybe.
Yeah, I think so.
I mean, maybe some of them. I also feel like there are rich people who are like, cool, I'm on a boat
Oh,
having,
yeah.
cabana people serve me cocktails, and
Yeah.
this is great. Like, I
Yeah.
have
Yeah.
invested some
Yeah.
money, but
Well,
like,
rich people, they feel they deserve to be where they are. Yeah. But other people who lie around feel like, I should be working. Oh, why am I not doing more?
I think it's so hard. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
Yeah.
I think
No, go ahead.
I think it's so hard, like to your point, to distinguish the effects of whether you're working or not from social status.
Yeah.
Because it's like, like we pointed out a lot, they're super confounded right now. Like if you're not working, it's really low social status.
Absolutely.
And so, or it can be if you don't have other reasons or money or something else.
Yeah.
So like,
well, then you're in a high social status if you're on a boat and they're serving
right.
drinks
And
and
so
stuff.
is it really about the working? I think it's partly about that, but I think it's also partly about your social status. And people being afraid, for themselves of poverty, but also other people, like somebody who might date you, like, am I going to be in poverty if I'm with, whatever it is.
Right.
And so I think that like that is also kind of mixed up in with it.
Yeah.
I think there's always going to be people wanting to show what they can contribute and what they can do, but I think that is actually a positive thing for the most part with respect to how basic income would affect things, because like some people will choose not to learn anything or do anything, but I think a lot of people will choose to do things for lots of different reasons, including to impress other people, to show just like people play sports or like learn all sorts of skills now, even when they're not getting paid
Kids
for
want
doing
to have
that.
jobs. Kids like to help. And do
exactly.
The things that adults are doing. They always want to help do things.
Yeah.
I never wanted to do that.
No, I'm not talking about you. You're not part of that.
Right.
picture.
But I think this is
most
so.
kids want these chores.
Exactly.
And be like the adults.
Yeah.
And feel like they're contributing.
Right. I think people do want to contribute, but I think that's the good thing too. Is like if you don't force people to have a job that maybe doesn't need to be done, then maybe they find a thing that really does need to be done.
Will come up.
And it's so much easier to have this as an emergent property of everybody looking around their environment and figuring out what needs to be done than it is for anybody or any organization to try to figure out where all those things are.
Yeah,
it's just really, really hard. And they might not all be paid things. They might be volunteer things. They might be fun things. They might be family things. They might be like giving more support and having less dysfunction or misery in a family could have come out of this time and relaxation and whatever. So there's just like so many of these kinds of things. Yeah.
So I want to come back to your point, Mom, about what if there are people who just need that kind of structure of a job and all of that, and are there going to be people who if they have a basic income and they don't need to work, they are going to be sadder than if they had to work. And I think it's true that there are going to be some people like that, but it's not all people.
No.
And if you're trying to do a job guarantee instead of a basic income, you're kind of forcing all people into that.
Yeah.
So then once you have a basic income, you can see, well, are there people who still need help in some way, and how do we help them? I don't know, maybe some kind of something like a jobs guarantee would be appropriate for those people. Yeah. But, it's really about like, let's look and see what the problems actually are and who's actually suffering and how to help them.
And who's really happy that they don't have a job.
Yeah.
Right.
Exactly.
Probably most people,
Yeah. Sultan, did you have a point?
Something came up to my mind. One of the biggest problem in the USA, the healthcare system. Do you think that people would be willing to give, like, for example, $50 every month to contribute to a healthcare system when they get the basic income.
Oh, healthcare. Yeah,
for
right.
getting almost free healthcare.
Right.
Yeah.
Because when we multiple it, I think it will be a very big amount of money. So I think it will be enough. I don't know how governments
Finance.
spend, how much money they spend as a budget for healthcare system. I don't know.
Yeah.
But
That's true, and jobs and
So-
healthcare are kind of
Yeah, that's a good point.
really
maybe
connected.
even $20 will be enough. I don't know.
Yeah, right.
So,
you need to know.
I think something that's, I kind of think about everything in kind of like, well, what are the resources that are being used? Is it doctor's time? Is it medications? And then how do we most efficiently put those resources to use? So I would say that it's less about the amount of money that needs to be collected and more about the people's incentives. So with something like a basic income in place, you know that everyone has a little bit of money to spend. So if you know that if every time you go to the doctor you have to pay $20 or something like that, then you might eliminate some of these problems where if people are so poor that they know they can't pay and they know they're going to get healthcare for free, then they might not show up for appointments and know that, well, they don't have any money anyway, so they can't punish me for this or something like that. If people are paying a little bit every time, it doesn't really matter what the amount is per se, but you can make it so that you're not wasting resources within the medical system.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
I think that's secondary, though. For me, that's secondary to the question of like if you have people not having jobs. Like right now, it's kind of this weird system where people get their healthcare through their job, which I think has problems
That's why
anyway.
people
but
don't quit.
yeah,
A lot of times they
Well,
don't quit.
you've got to have healthcare paid for by the government.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
That's what I was sort of leading to. It's like it seems like the natural, efficient
I agree.
complement to basic income or to any
And-
system is that. But.
Yeah, I mean that's something that we should have regardless of whether there's
Yeah,
a
I
basic
agree.
income, I think.
Right.
And then beyond that, the question is, well, how do you make sure that's efficient and you're serving people's health needs as well as possible? And I think a basic income can help there because you can charge people money now.
Right.
And it doesn't have to be like the full amount, but just for the copay and that kind of thing. Yeah.
I
Go ahead.
was talking about paying it monthly, every month,
Yeah.
as a mandatory.
She's talking about funding the healthcare. I
Yeah.
think that's why I was
Because
bringing that up.
Yeah.
by giving $1,000 every month, I think everybody would be willing to give it like $20 or $50. I don't know
So
how much.
I don't think something like that is particularly necessary. But you know me. I don't think if the government's paying for the healthcare, I don't think government spending necessarily needs to be funded in the way we think of, like through taxes and that kind of thing. So it's just a matter of how many resources do we have, how many doctors do we have, how many hospitals do we have, and how do you set the prices so that you're making full use of the doctors and the hospitals for the benefit of everyone.
Is government paying for healthcare? I mean, that's
In
not-
this hypothetical scenario, they are. Yeah.
Okay. I mean, but healthcare issue is so complex. I can't even. That's a whole other discussion.
Yeah.
2 hours. I mean,
And there's stuff with like patents and
and insurance company
liability
involvement
and,
how where does the money funnel through and
it's really
So the
complicated.
main
Yeah.
reason is not money, right? I don't know the reasons, so just I'm assuming.
The reasons why it's expensive now, or
Yeah, lack of doctors or the money.
So many things.
I think there's part of it is lack of doctors. There's the American Medical Association only allows so many doctors to be trained each year.
Poor medical record keeping.
Poor medical record keeping. There's a lot of
Really? Wow.
yeah. So
overcharging for certain services and parts and
or
I mean-
over providing services that are unnecessary.
Right.
There's a lot of parts to it, and I think the pricing is really inefficient. Because
it differs from state to state, hospital to hospital.
well, it's really complicated too. Like they have like whole lists of like medical, different services, and you have to like check off the right boxes,
Right.
and what code does it correspond to, and all of that. There's I guess the answer to the question is that there's a lot of things we can do to improve it.
Yeah.
but I think part of it can be allowing market mechanisms to work a little bit better, and that just from the basic income side of thing, having people, everyone kind of spend the same amount of money for when they go to the doctor, and
But this seems like such a minor issue. Like, not that it's not helpful, but that just seems like such a minor issue to me.
Which one?
The issue of incentivizing people to show up to their appointments and things like that.
Yeah.
Like, that's a good thing to have as an
Right.
option, but it seems pretty minimal in terms of the major issues in healthcare.
Right.
Even they don't, they ask only a few questions when you try to make a health care insurance.
Right.
They almost don't ask anything about yourself. So
Yeah.
I don't know how they are pricing it.
Yeah.
What's their parameters?
Exactly.
I think it has to do with health insurance. The insurance companies want to pay as little as possible, but they're required to pay a certain amount, and it's not really a market pricing mechanism. Like they're going to have to pay whatever they have to pay. So then drug companies and medical device companies and hospitals will charge. They know that people are
Right.
it comes down to people need medical care, and they're not going to say no to medical care, so you can charge them whatever you want. I think that's the kind of the basic mechanism,
Right.
and then there's all this other kind of complexity in there.
A lot of complexity. If you look
yeah.
at a brochure from Medicare or a book from any insurance, health insurance, there's no way you can figure it out. You just
Yeah.
have to go ahead and do something.
Right.
But those regulations, government, well, look at what's happened with Obamacare and the trouble getting that through, and now it's being taken back, and all the pre-existing condition issues.
So
yeah.
all of this stuff, and we could have an entire discussion
Yeah,
on healthcare, and maybe we
I don't know
will.
if basic income will affect it, that's all. I don't think that's...
And according to the experiment that was made in Canada,
Yeah.
the healthcare was better.
Reduced by 8%.
People's health was better,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah.
They have what?
Health costs reduced by 8%.
By...
Basic income.
They
Okay, just across the board.
Well, if you're not poor,
Right,
that helps with your health. And
Right.
if you
right,
have some money to spend,
yeah,
Canada already has socialized healthcare,
right.
which is interesting.
Yeah, right.
And then basic income, even in that context, helped reduce the costs. Yeah. So I think we could have one on healthcare, and there's a lot to get into
definitely.
here. Yeah. Let's watch another clip,
Okay.
and I think.
Oh man, we're almost out of time.
we're almost out of time, so I'm just going to kind of skip to the end here.
You had so many clips we didn't get to.
See, now that I'm doing it, now that I have a tab for each one, you guys can see how far I get through. I got to here.
Wow.
And, now
Sorry
we're going to
about
skip to
that.
the end. No, that's
Like
fine.
a third of the way through.
Yeah. There's plenty to talk about here. Here they're arguing
So
with each other.
relying on the tax code as the mechanism of redistribution is not the most, and I'm going to use the word that's been used, efficient way of redistribution.
But then how, if you're paying for your program, you gotta raise taxes. So, we're back into tax mode. Or maybe you wanna, run the deficit.
How are we going to pay for that last $2.3 trillion tax bill that we passed?
No. The problem is no matter the amount, you have to raise taxes. So saying to me,
we don't.
taxes don't work,
I'm not a deficit hawk.
There's
There's different types of deficit uses that are problematic. So deficits going towards enriching the wealthy enhances our plutocracy and leads to greater inequality. Deficits going towards building our infrastructure enables our human capabilities and us as a society to grow, to flourish, and to have self-determination. So I'm all for the use of government spending towards productive uses of our society. The problem is not deficits, but what deficits are being used towards.
So I liked a lot of what Darrick Hamilton was saying here. It's interesting because he was worried before about basic income causing inflation, but now here he's saying, the government can spend money, and as long as that money is going towards something productive, it's something you can do. And that's something I fundamentally agree with. So I liked that he was saying that. And, I think I think before I said this was something that they were both wrong about, that it kind of had to be paid for by taxes, but now he's kind of saying more kind of like the kinds of things I say. I mean, I wouldn't say like, I wouldn't use words like plutocracy and stuff like that, but I generally agree with what he's saying here, and that's kind of why I chose this.
Is that deficit spending? Is that what he's talking about? What is deficit spending?
So deficit spending, it just means the government spending more money than they're collecting through taxes.
Oh, okay.
That's deficit spending. Some people talk about, printing money or whatever, but what you call printing money, I call government spending. And the government can spend as much as the economy can handle. And I think that's kind of Hamilton's point here.
And the other person is saying, no, you have to have taxes to pay for it?
Yeah, so basically she is. And
well, but he accused her first of so he made a poor argument earlier, I think.
Well, she said the problem is that no matter the amount, you have to raise taxes. So she's thinking from a balanced budget perspective,
right?
And he's not as much. So I agree with him on this one. So at the beginning when I was saying like kind of together, they might have the whole picture. Like he's on the jobs guarantee side, but he's talking more my language in terms of the government can spend as long as the economy has room to handle that spending. Yeah.
Modern monetary theorists are big proponents of job guarantees, so that's where he's coming from.
Yeah, I think he's talking to some MMT people. Yeah, and we did one on MMT, so you guys know what I think about that. Okay, so let's get some final thoughts. Job guarantee, basic income, anything from that came up?
I think I'll just double down on some of the things that you highlighted and I highlighted, like the opportunity cost that's really important. And maybe some things that came out I hadn't thought about were the implementation issues, like the nitty-gritty of how would you decide whether someone deserved to have this job guarantee? What does it mean to be willing to work? And how could that end up getting kind of paternalistic or strange in terms of sort of... I don't think that's the biggest picture point, but I made those points at the very beginning, so that's something else that I kind of got out of the discussion.
Yeah. I agree with that. I don't think I have anything else to add. I think job guarantee is just too much of another bureaucratic structure to work well.
Yeah.
And it wouldn't be, as efficient. I'll use that word everybody likes to use.
Yeah.
It wouldn't be as efficient as just giving people money. It just wouldn't.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and according to the article, it says like $7 billion. It costs
700 billion. 400 to 700 billion, and that's if there isn't a recession.
So it seems
For what?
Jobs guarantee.
It's it doesn't seem doable. I think so.
Yeah.
I think a lot of the same things that Bethany said. I wasn't really a fan of jobs guarantee, but I hadn't sort of thought about a lot of the like implementation nuances. And I think we've talked about this before, but that sort of issue of like, the sort of inherent social hierarchy of like, how are people like getting worth and dignity, and so it feels like a separate issue that I think potentially like UBI would help a lot with, but it's sort of like I was reminded again in this conversation of like, that's not a thing that like society is going to like magically solve. It's not going to just like solve itself. I'd be like, okay, cool, everyone has money.
Yeah.
Now that there's still going to be a lot of that, like ways in which people create hierarchies, and they're like, okay, well, maybe it'll be the people like, oh, well, you're choosing not to work, and so there's a social looking down on that, or maybe it'll operate in the opposite. But I don't.
That's interesting.
Well, the article was talking about how Jovan Thompson or whatever it is had all these like burglary charges and things like that. Well, and later on in the article it said that job guarantee would reduce recidivism by like 26% or something like that. But basic income would do far more than that without having to bother with working. And like that part where I had Alex keep reading, it talks about how these people might not be fit for working job, like they're violent or illiterate or whatever.
Yeah.
So you wouldn't have to worry about finding a place for these people if you just gave them money.
Right.
Yeah. So I agree with a lot of what everyone's saying, and I think basic income solves the problem of how to get money to consumers, and a job guarantee tries to solve this problem too, but it combines it with a bunch of other stuff. And I think if you're worried about how to get consumer spending money, which is an important problem that needs to be, it's something that needs to happen in our society and our economy, then basic income's the answer, and then you can kind of see what other problems there are and go from there. I think a job guarantee just tries to lump a bunch of stuff together, stuff that's kind of morally lumped together in our society, but maybe doesn't need to be. So that's it.
Yeah.
Thanks,
Cool.
everyone.
Here,
Thanks,
here.
everyone.
Yeah.
Thanks for coming after
Yeah.
Christmas. Happy
Yeah.
holidays.
Happy
Please
holidays.
take cookies.
Cookies.